I faked a vacation to escape my own life. My son said move the money like I was nothing more than a bank account. I was hiding in my bathroom, crying on the cold tile floor. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and I'm 73 years old. This morning, like every morning for the past 5 years, I woke up at 5:30 in my cramped studio apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The radiator clangs like a prison chain, and the smell of my neighbor's burnt coffee seeps through the thin walls. My arthritis makes every movement deliberate. My hands shake slightly as I reach for my reading glasses, perched on the nightstand next to a stack of unpaid bills. I've been living in this shoebox for 3 years now, ever since I sold my house in Queens to help my son David buy his dream home in Westchester. He promised it was temporary. He promised I'd move in with him once he got settled. That was 1,000 days ago, and I'm still counting. The morning light filters through my single window, casting shadows across the faded family photos taped to my refrigerator. There's David at his college graduation, his arm around me, both of us grinning. There's my daughter Sarah at her wedding, radiant in white. There's my late husband Robert, holding our first grandchild. These pictures used to fill me with warmth. Now they feel like evidence of a life that belonged to someone else. My phone buzzed, a text from David. My heart always jumps when I see his name, hoping for something kind, something that reminds me I matter. Instead, it read, "Mom, need you to transfer $5,000 to my account today. Car repairs, thanks." No please, no love you, no how are you feeling. Just a demand wrapped in the thinnest veneer of politeness. I had been planning something special for myself. Something I hadn't done in decades. A real vacation. Just 3 days at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. Somewhere with mountains and quiet mornings and no one asking me for anything. I'd saved up $700 over 6 months, hiding $20 bills in my Bible like a child hiding candy. But as I stared at David's message, I felt that familiar weight in my chest. The weight of always saying yes, always giving, always disappearing a little more. I typed back, "I'm actually planning a small trip for myself this weekend." The response came immediately. "Seriously? Right now? I told you it's urgent." Then another message. "Fine, whatever. I'll figure it out myself. As usual." And there it was. The guilt. The manipulation wrapped in wounded pride. The way he could make my one tiny request for space feel like a betrayal of everything I'd ever done for him. I faked the vacation. I told my family I was going away for the weekend, turned off my phone, and spent 3 days in my apartment, pretending I was somewhere else. I made myself fancy tea and imagined I was in a mountain cabin. I ordered Chinese takeout and pretended it was room service. I watched old movies and let myself cry during the romantic scenes, remembering when I believed in happy endings. On Sunday evening, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages. My heart raced, thinking something terrible had happened. But as I read through them, I realized the emergency was always the same. They needed something from me. David, "Mom, where are you? I need to talk about the money situation." Sarah, "Mom, can you babysit next week? I know you're away, but when you get back?" My sister Helen, "David called looking for you. Said you're being dramatic." And then, the message that broke something inside me. From David, sent at 2 in the morning. "I know you're not really on vacation. Stop playing games and move the money." I was sitting on my bathroom floor when I read that, my back against the cold tile wall. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white. My reflection in the mirror across from me looked like a stranger. When had I become this woman? This shadow of a person begging for scraps of love from her own children? The tears came then. Not the gentle tears of sadness, but the ugly, choking sobs of someone who has finally seen the truth. My son didn't call because he missed me. He called because he needed something. My daughter didn't visit because she loved spending time with me. She visited because free babysitting was convenient. I had become an ATM machine with Christmas cards and birthday presents attached. Let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you about 47 years of sacrifice that somehow turned into 47 years of invisibility. I met Robert when I was 19, working as a secretary in a law firm in Brooklyn. He was 22, studying to be an accountant, with dreams of starting his own practice. We got married in a small ceremony at St. Mary's Church, with my mother's white dress altered to fit me and a reception in the church basement with sandwiches I made myself the night before. David was born 2 years later, and Sarah followed 3 years after that. Robert's accounting practice struggled those first few years. The big firms got all the business, and we lived paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment in Astoria. I remember heating baby formula with hot water from the tap because our gas had been shut off. I remember walking 4 blocks to the grocery store because we couldn't afford to fix our car. But I was happy. We were a family. We had each other. When the kids were small, I worked nights as a cleaning lady in office buildings while Robert watched them. I'd come home at dawn, exhausted, and make breakfast for everyone before Robert left for work. Then I'd spend the day with David and Sarah, taking them to the park, reading to them, teaching them their letters. I never complained. Not when my back ached from scrubbing floors. Not when I fell asleep standing up during David's Little League games. Not when other mothers talked about their weekend plans while I calculated whether we could afford David's new cleats. Love felt like sacrifice then. The more you gave up, the more you proved you cared. When David turned 16, he wanted to go on a school trip to Washington, D.C. The cost was $800. We didn't have $800, but I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in his eyes when his friends talked about the trip. So I took on extra cleaning jobs, working 7 days a week for 2 months. I lost 12 pounds from exhaustion and stress, but David got to go. He never thanked me. Not once. Sarah's wedding cost us $28,000. We took out a second mortgage on our house, and I went back to cleaning offices full-time even though I was already 58, and my knees protested every flight of stairs. She wanted the perfect day, and I wanted her to have it. The photographs from that wedding show Sarah glowing with happiness and me standing in the background, smiling but hollow-eyed with fatigue. When Robert was diagnosed with emphysema, the medical bills started piling up. Insurance covered some of it, but not the experimental treatments, not the special medications, not the oxygen equipment we needed at home. I sold my mother's jewelry, the pieces she'd given me when I got married. I sold my piano, the one Robert had saved up to buy me for our 10th anniversary. David was making good money by then, working in finance in Manhattan. Sarah had married well, her husband was a successful lawyer. But when I mentioned the medical bills, they both had excuses. David was saving for a house. Sarah was starting a family. They'd help when they could, but not right now. So I helped Robert alone. I held his hand through the sleepless nights when he couldn't breathe. I drove him to doctor appointments and waited in sterile rooms while they ran tests. I watched our savings disappear, dollar by dollar, keeping my husband alive. Robert died on a Tuesday morning in March. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. The funeral cost $7,000. David and Sarah each contributed $500 and then left me to handle everything else. After the funeral, David came to the house. Not to comfort me, not to share memories of his father. He came to discuss my finances. "Mom, you can't afford to keep this house," he said, sitting at my kitchen table like he was conducting a business meeting. "The property taxes alone are eating up your Social Security." He wasn't wrong. The house Robert and I had bought for $40,000 in 1978 was now worth $350,000. But the taxes had gone up accordingly, and my pension wasn't enough to cover them. "I've found a nice apartment for you," David continued. It's small, but it's all you need. And if you sell the house, you could help me with my down payment. I've been looking at a place in Westchester. Sarah thinks it's a great investment. Sarah thinks. As if my daughter had any say in what happened to my life. I should have said no. I should have told him I needed time to grieve, time to figure out what I wanted. But I was so tired, so overwhelmed by the decisions I had to make alone. And David made it sound like he was helping me. You could live with us eventually, he said. Once we get settled. Rachel's pregnant again, so we'll need the extra room for now, but later. Later. Always later. I sold the house. David got his down payment, and I moved into the studio apartment where I sit today. That was 3 years ago, and I'm still waiting for later to arrive. The apartment is on East 79th Street, 4th floor. No elevator. The superintendent is a man named Carlos who speaks broken English and fixes everything with duct tape. My neighbors are a young couple who fights loudly at night, and an elderly man who never leaves his apartment but whose television plays games shows all day at volume that makes my walls vibrate. My monthly Social Security check is $1,200. My rent is $1,100. That leaves me $100 for food, utilities, medicine, and everything else. I shop at the dollar store and buy dented cans and expired bread. I take my blood pressure medication every other day to make it last longer. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. But David calls me every few weeks, and his voice brightens when he talks about his stock portfolio, his new car, his wife's jewelry. He's doing well. The money from my house really helped, he says, like it was his money all along. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Such small words to paper over such a large wound. Do you know what it's like to disappear while you're still alive? To become background music in your own family's life? David invites me to family dinners occasionally. Always last minute. Always with conditions. Can you bring dessert? Can you help Rachel with the dishes? Can you watch the kids while we run errands? I always say yes. I always bring dessert. I always help with dishes. I always watch the grandchildren while my son and his wife disappear for hours, leaving me to manage 2 toddlers who barely know my name. The children, Emma, 5, and James, 3, are beautiful. They have David's eyes and Rachel's smile. But they've been taught to see me as the help, not as their grandmother. Emma calls me David's mom instead of grandma. James cries when I try to hug him. Rachel treats me with polite indifference. She's never rude exactly, but she makes it clear that I'm an obligation, not a welcome guest. She talks around me at dinner, discussing vacation plans and home improvements and school choices as if I'm not sitting right there. We're thinking about private school for Emma, she'll say to David. The public schools here just aren't good enough. Private school costs $30,000 a year. I know because I looked it up afterward, wondering how they could afford something I never could. The answer, of course, is my house money, my sacrifice paying for my granddaughter's privilege while I eat canned soup for dinner. Sarah lives in California now. She moved there after the divorce, taking my grandson Lucas with her. I see him twice a year if I'm lucky. He's 8 now, and when I video call with him, he gets bored after 5 minutes and hands the phone back to his mother. Say goodbye to Grandma, Sarah prompts, and Lucas waves absently before running off to play. I send him birthday presents, Christmas presents, Easter baskets, expensive things I can't afford, bought with money I should be using for groceries. But I want him to remember me when the packages arrive. I want him to know his grandmother loves him, even from 3,000 miles away. Sarah never says thank you. The presents arrive, and that's the end of it. No phone call, no text, no photo of Lucas enjoying whatever I've sent. I might as well be dropping gifts down a well. Last Christmas, I spent $400 on presents for everyone. I bought David a cashmere scarf, Rachel a silk blouse, the children expensive toys, Sarah a piece of jewelry, Lucas a remote control car. I wrapped everything carefully with expensive paper and matching ribbons. David's family was polite, but distracted. The children opened their gifts quickly and moved on to more exciting presents from their parents. Rachel smiled and said thank you, but I could tell she was calculating whether the blouse was worth the trip to return it. My presents to them were opened and forgotten within minutes. Their presents to me could fit in a small bag. A generic candle from David and Rachel. A coffee mug from Sarah that looked like it came from a gas station gift shop. Nothing thoughtful, nothing personal, nothing that suggested they'd spent even 5 minutes thinking about what I might like. But the real gift was what happened after the present opening. David disappeared to take a work call. Rachel went to the kitchen to prepare dinner, declining my offer to help. The children went to their rooms to play with their new toys. And I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by wrapping paper, invisible again. I stayed for dinner because that's what's expected. I helped clean up because that's what I do. And when it was time to leave, David handed me a small container of leftovers. "For your lunches this week," he said, like he was doing me a favor. I took the subway home, holding that container of leftover turkey and stuffing, and cried the whole way back to my apartment. A 70-year-old woman crying on the F train on Christmas night, and nobody even noticed. That night, I called Sarah in California. It was 9 p.m., my time, 6 p.m., hers. I thought maybe we could have a real conversation, mother to daughter, about how I was feeling so alone. "Hi, Mom," she said, but I could hear the television in the background and Lucas demanding something. "Can I call you back? We're right in the middle of dinner." She never called back. The isolation got worse after that. Months would go by without a real conversation with either of my children. David's calls became purely transactional. "Mom, can you transfer money for the kids' summer camp?" "Mom, my credit card payment is due. Can you help?" "Mom, we're refinancing the house and need a cosigner." I always said yes, every time, because saying no felt like admitting I wasn't needed. And being needed was the only connection I had left. But needed isn't the same as loved, is it? An ATM is needed. A doormat is needed. A person who never says no is needed. I started keeping a journal last year, writing down every interaction with my children. Not to keep score exactly, but to see if I was imagining things. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe this was just how adult families worked. The entries painted a clear picture. January 15th, David called asking for money for Rachel's birthday gift. 2-minute conversation. January 23rd, called David to ask about Emma's school play. Went to voicemail. Never called back. February 2nd. Sarah texted asking me to mail Lucas's birthday gift early because she forgot to order something. No please, no thank you. February 14th, Valentine's Day, no calls. February 28th, David called asking for loan for new furniture, said they were having marriage troubles and buying new furniture might help. Sent $3. March 15th, called to ask about marriage troubles. David said everything was fine and seemed annoyed I brought it up. March 30th, Easter, invited to David's house. Asked to bring dessert and help with cleanup. Spent most of the day washing dishes while family enjoyed themselves in other room. Page after page of the same pattern. I gave, they took. I called, they were busy. I cared, they were indifferent. But the journal also showed me something else. It showed me how small I had become, how I had trained my own children to treat me like a service provider instead of their mother. The breaking point came 6 months ago, on my 73rd birthday. I had been dropping hints for weeks. Nothing obvious, nothing demanding. Just casual mentions of the date, wondering if anyone remembered. I even bought myself a small cake from the grocery store, just in case someone wanted to celebrate with me. The day came and went. No calls, no cards, no messages. I sat in my apartment that evening, eating a slice of birthday cake alone, watching the sunset over Manhattan. My phone stayed silent all day. At 10 p.m., I finally got a text from Sarah. Happy belated birthday, Mom. Sorry, crazy day yesterday. Love you. Belated. Like she had remembered but was just too busy to text me on the actual day. But I knew the truth. She hadn't remembered at all. Someone had probably reminded her, or she'd seen a Facebook memory, or it had popped up on her calendar. David never acknowledged it at all. That night, I made a decision that terrified me. I decided to test them. I decided to see what would happen if I disappeared for a weekend. Not dramatically, not permanently, just quietly, to see if anyone would notice, to see if anyone would worry. I planned my fake vacation for the following month. I told David and Sarah I was going to visit an old friend upstate. I made it sound casual, not seeking permission, just sharing information like any adult would. "That sounds nice, Mom," Sarah said. "Have fun." David just grunted acknowledgement. I spent 3 days in my apartment, phone turned off, pretending to be somewhere else. I read books I'd been meaning to read. I took long baths. I cooked meals for one without feeling guilty about the cost. I watched old movies and let myself feel nostalgic without apologizing for living in the past. For 3 days, I remembered what it felt like to exist for myself. When I turned my phone back on Sunday night, I expected worry. I expected care. I expected my children to be concerned that they hadn't heard from their elderly mother for 3 days. Instead, I found a list of demands and complaints. David had called 6 times, not because he was worried, but because he needed me to co-sign a loan application, and the bank needed it by Monday. He was angry that I was unreachable when he needed something important. Sarah had texted repeatedly asking if I could send money for Lucas's school trip. She was frustrated that I wasn't responding to her urgent requests. My sister Helen had called because David had contacted her, upset that I was playing games and being irresponsible. And then, the message that shattered what was left of my heart. David had texted at 2 a.m. "I know you're not really on vacation. Stop playing games and move the money." He had figured out I was lying. Not because he knew me well enough to see through the deception, but because he needed something and couldn't imagine his mother having a life independent of his needs. I was sitting on my bathroom floor when I read that message, and everything became crystal clear. I wasn't being too sensitive. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't a beloved mother whose children were just busy. I was being used. As I sat there on the cold tile floor, my back against the bathtub, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt anger, not sadness, not hurt, not disappointment. Anger. Pure, clean, righteous anger. How dare they? How dare they treat me like an inconvenience when I had given them everything? How dare they act like my love was something they were entitled to, something that came without conditions or expectations? I had spent 73 years putting everyone else's needs before my own. I had sacrificed my dreams, my comfort, my financial security, my peace of mind. And for what? So my children could see me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited? That night, I made a list. Not in my journal, but on a piece of paper I taped to my bathroom mirror. A list of everything I had given my family over the past 5 years. Down payment for David's house, $150,000 wedding expenses for Sarah, $28,000 emergency loans to David, $47,000 gifts for grandchildren, $8,000 babysitting services, countless hours emotional support during David's marriage problems, endless care packages to Sarah after her divorce, $3,000 co-signing David's car loan, $35, 0 responsibility emergency credit card payments, $12,000 travel expenses to visit Sarah in California, $4,000. The total was staggering. Over $287,000 in direct financial support, plus thousands of hours of free childcare and emotional labor. And what had I received in return? Casual indifference, polite obligation, the privilege of being useful. I spent the next week in a fog of realization. Every interaction with my children took on a new meaning. Every conversation revealed itself as transactional. Every expression of love was tied to something they wanted. When David called to check in, he always mentioned financial stress within the first 5 minutes. When Sarah shared good news about Lucas, she always followed it with a request for money to celebrate properly. When either of them said, "I love you," it was always preceded or followed by a favor. I had taught them to use me. By never saying no, by always being available, by never putting my own needs first, I had trained my own children to see me as a means to an end, rather than a person worth loving for my own sake. The revelation was devastating, but it was also liberating. Because once you see the truth clearly, you can't unsee it. And once you understand the game being played, you can decide whether you want to keep playing. I decided I didn't. The first change I made was small but significant. When David called asking for money to cover his mortgage payment because things are tight this month, I said something I had never said before. "I can't help you this time." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "What do you mean you can't help?" he finally asked. "I mean I don't have the money to give you." "But you always have money. You have the savings from the house sale." "I've been helping you with that money for 3 years, David. It's almost gone." This was a lie. I still had about $60,000 left, carefully invested with the help of a financial advisor I'd started seeing. But I wanted to see how he would react to the idea that his personal ATM might be running dry. His reaction told me everything I needed to know. "Mom, you can't be serious. I've got bills to pay. Rachel is counting on this." Not concern for my financial security. Not questions about how I would manage if I really was running out of money. Just frustration that his resource might be unavailable. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking when I put the phone down, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the rush of standing up for myself for the first time in decades. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. He called again an hour later. I didn't answer. He texted, "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't like you." He was right. It wasn't like me, and that was exactly the point. I spent the next few days expecting the guilt to overwhelm me. I kept waiting to feel terrible about disappointing my son, about letting him down. But the guilt never came. Instead, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed: peace. My apartment felt quieter without the constant anxiety of wondering when the next request would come. My shoulders felt lighter without carrying everyone else's problems. My mind felt clearer without the constant mental calculation of who needed what and how I could provide it. For the first time in years, I had a conversation with my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, that wasn't interrupted by a call from my children. We talked about her grandchildren who visited every Sunday and helped her with groceries. We talked about her son, who called every few days just to chat. We talked about her daughter, who sent photos and updates about her life in Florida. Not because she wanted something, but because she wanted to share her joy with her mother. "Family should fill you up, not empty you out," Mrs. Rodriguez said as we sat in her kitchen, sharing homemade empanadas and strong coffee. Her words hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time my family had filled me up? When was the last time I felt energized after spending time with them instead of drained? I couldn't remember. That weekend, I did something radical. I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Alone. Not because I was waiting for someone to invite me. Not because I was killed time between family obligations. Just because I wanted to see beautiful things. I spent 4 hours wandering through galleries, looking at paintings I had seen in books but never in person. I sat on benches in front of masterpieces and let myself feel whatever the art inspired. Wonder, sadness, joy, hope. In the modern art section, I found myself standing in front of a painting by Mark Rothko, layers of deep blues and purples that seemed to pulse with emotion. An older man standing next to me said, "Beautiful, isn't it? My wife would have loved this one." We started talking. His name was Frank, and his wife had died 2 years earlier. She had been an art teacher, and they had spent their retirement traveling to museums around the world. The hardest part, he said, isn't missing her. It's remembering how to live for myself again. We were together so long I forgot how to be just me. I understood exactly what he meant. We grabbed coffee in the museum cafe and talked for another hour. About art, about loss, about the strange experience of rebuilding identity in your 70s. It was the first real conversation I'd had with another adult in months. Not about what someone needed from me, not about problems I was supposed to solve. Just two people sharing thoughts and experiences. When we parted ways, Frank asked if I'd like to join him for another museum visit the following week. I said yes. Walking home, I felt something unfamiliar spreading through my chest. It took me several blocks to identify the feeling. Happiness. Not the brief satisfaction of making someone else happy, not the momentary relief of solving someone else's problem, but genuine, personal happiness. The kind that comes from doing something you enjoy with someone whose company you appreciate. That night, David called. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe we can work something out. What if I paid you back in installments?" He wasn't apologizing for treating me like a bank. He wasn't acknowledging that constantly asking for money might be inappropriate. He was negotiating terms for my continued usefulness. "David, I need to ask you something," I said. "When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something, just because you cared." Another long silence. What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time you called to ask about my health, or my day, or my feelings, without wanting anything in return?" "Mom, that's not fair. Of course I care about you." "Then show me. Call me next week. Don't ask for anything. Don't mention money or problems or things you need help with. Just talk to me like I'm a person you enjoy spending time with." "Okay," he said, but I could hear the confusion in his voice. The concept of calling me without an agenda was apparently foreign to him. He never made that call. 2 weeks later, Sarah called. Not to ask how I was doing, not to share news about Lucas, but to complain that I hadn't sent her son's allowance money for the month. "Mom, Lucas is asking why Grandma didn't send his spending money." I had to make up an excuse. I felt a familiar flash of guilt, quickly replaced by clarity. "Sarah, why are you giving Lucas spending money from me?" "You've been sending it every month for 2 years. He's gotten used to it." "I sent that money to help you during the divorce, when things were financially difficult. I didn't realize it had become an expectation." "Well, it has. He's just a kid, Mom. He doesn't understand mixed messages." Mixed messages. As if my financial support was a contract I had signed rather than a gift given freely. "Sarah, I love Lucas, but I'm not responsible for providing his allowance. That's what parents do." "Seriously? You're going to punish an 8-year-old because you're upset about something?" Suddenly, I was the villain for not wanting to fund my grandson's spending money indefinitely. Suddenly, my decision to stop being a bank was about punishing children rather than preserving what was left of my financial security. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm just not giving money anymore unless it's a genuine emergency." "Fine," Sarah said. "But don't expect me to explain to Lucas why his grandmother doesn't care about him anymore." She hung up. I sat holding the phone, stunned by the manipulation. In Sarah's mind, love was measured by financial contribution. If I wasn't sending money, I didn't care. If I prioritized my own financial stability, I was abandoning my grandchildren. How had my relationships with my children become so twisted? That evening, I called my sister Helen. We hadn't spoken in several months, and I needed to talk to someone who remembered me before I became everyone's ATM. "Maggie," she said, using the nickname she'd called me since childhood. "How are you, sweetheart?" Just hearing someone call me a term of endearment with genuine affection brought tears to my eyes. "I'm struggling, Helen. I think I've made some terrible mistakes with David and Sarah. I told her everything. About the years of constant requests for money. About the way David treated me like an employee rather than his mother. About Sarah's assumption that I existed to solve her problems. About the fake vacation and David's cruel text message. About my recent conversations where I had finally said no. Helen listened without judgment, making small sounds of sympathy and understanding. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished, "you haven't made mistakes. You've been too generous, too giving. But that's not a mistake, that's love. The mistake is theirs, for taking advantage of it." "But maybe I created this situation," I said. "Maybe I taught them to expect this by never saying no." "Maggie, you were a single mother after Robert died. You did what you thought was best to help your kids succeed. The fact that they turned your generosity into entitlement isn't your fault." She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "But you're right that you enabled it, and the only way to change the dynamic is to stop enabling it, which sounds like exactly what you're doing." "It's so hard," I whispered. "What if they decide they don't need me at all? What if I end up completely alone? Sweetheart, are you really not alone now? When was the last time David or Sarah spent time with you just because they enjoyed your company? When was the last time they asked about your dreams, your fears, your hopes? When was the last time they made you feel seen and valued as a person?" I couldn't answer because the answer was never. Or so long ago that the memories had faded into mythology. "You're afraid of being alone," Helen continued, "but you're already alone. The only difference is that now you're alone and being used. At least if you set boundaries, you'll be alone with dignity." Her words stung because they were true. I had been so afraid of abandonment that I had accepted exploitation. I had confused being needed with being loved for so long that I had forgotten what genuine love felt like. After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment and looked around with new eyes. The place I had seen as temporary, as a stepping stone to rejoining my family, suddenly looked like exactly what it was: my home, my books on the shelf by the window, my mother's china tea set displayed carefully on the small dining table, the soft throw blanket I had bought myself last month in a moment of rare self-indulgence. These were my things, in my space, creating my environment. When had I stopped seeing this as deficiency and started seeing it as independence? I made myself dinner, a real dinner, with vegetables and seasoning and attention to how it looked on the plate. I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion and decided that choosing myself was special enough. As I ate, I thought about Frank from the museum and Mrs. Rodriguez from across the hall and Helen on the phone. People who talked to me like I was interesting, like my thoughts and stories mattered. People who gave as much as they took in conversation. People who seemed to actually enjoy my company. When was the last time David or Sarah had laughed at something I said? When was the last time they had asked for my opinion on something that didn't directly affect them? When was the last time they had shared good news with me just because they wanted me to be happy for them? The answer to all of these questions was the same. I couldn't remember. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called an old friend. Martha and I had worked together at the law firm 40 years ago, before we both left to raise our families. We had stayed in touch for a while, exchanging holiday cards and occasional phone calls, but life had intervened and we had lost contact. I found her number in my old address book and dialed before I could lose my courage. "Margaret Connor?" she said when I identified myself. My goodness, it's been years. Her voice was warm with genuine pleasure, and I realized how long it had been since anyone had sounded truly happy to hear from me. We talked for over an hour, about her husband's retirement, about her daughter's career success, about her son's new baby, but also about her garden, about books she was reading, about a pottery class she had started taking. "I feel like I spent my 50s taking care of everyone else," she said. "Now I'm finally taking care of myself, and it's wonderful. Scary sometimes, but wonderful." When I told her about my situation with David and Sarah, she didn't offer advice or judgment, she just listened, and then shared her own story of learning to set boundaries with her adult children. The hardest thing to accept, she said, is that we can't love our children into loving us back. We can't give enough or sacrifice enough to earn the kind of relationship we want. Either they value us as people, or they don't. And if they don't, no amount of money or favors will change that. Before we hung up, Martha invited me to join her book club. We meet twice a month and we're reading some fascinating things. Plus, the women are lovely. I think you'd really like them. I said yes, without hesitation. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, lighter, more energetic. I had plans that didn't involve anyone else's problems. I had conversations to look forward to that would be about books and ideas rather than needs and requests. I was becoming a person again instead of just a mother. That afternoon, David called. "Mom, we need to talk about this money situation. Rachel thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." Rachel thinks. Always Rachel thinks, never David thinks. As if my son couldn't form an opinion about his own mother without his wife's input. "I'm not having a breakdown," I said calmly. "I'm having a breakthrough." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've realized that our relationship has become unbalanced. You call me when you need something. You visit when it's convenient. You include me in family events when you need help. But you never just call to talk. You never visit just to spend time together. You never include me in things just because you enjoy my company." "That's not true," he said, but his protest was weak. "When was the last time you called me just to say hello?" Silence. "When was the last time you invited me over just to have dinner together, without asking me to bring anything or help with anything?" More silence. "When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my feelings, without relating it back to what you need from me?" "Mom, this is ridiculous. Of course I care about your life." "Then tell me something about it. Tell me what I'm interested in right now. Tell me what I've been doing with my time lately. Tell me something that matters to me that has nothing to do with you or your family." The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. I don't understand what you want from me." And there it was, the heart of the problem. He didn't understand what I wanted because he had never considered that I might want anything. In his mind, I existed to provide for him. My desires, my needs, my dreams were invisible to him. "I want a relationship with my son," I said, "not a relationship with someone who calls me when he needs money. I want you to value me as a person, not just as someone who can solve problems for you. I do value you. Then show me. The next time you call, don't ask for anything. The next time you invite me over, don't give me chores to do. The next time we have a conversation, ask me about my day before you tell me about yours." "This is crazy," he said. "You're my mother. Of course I'm going to call when I need help. That's what families do." "Yes, David. That's what families do. They help each other. But right now, help only flows in one direction. When was the last time you helped me with something?" We included you in Christmas dinner." "You invited me to bring dessert and clean up afterward. That's not including me, that's using me." "Fine," he said, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. "If that's how you feel, maybe we don't need to do family dinners anymore." "Maybe we don't," I said. "Until you can figure out how to have a relationship with me that isn't based on what I can do for you." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief, from the incredible lightness of finally saying what needed to be said. Within an hour, my phone rang. Sarah. "Mom, David called me. He says you're acting crazy and refusing to help the family anymore." "Is that what he said?" "He said you're being selfish and unreasonable. He said you accused him of using you." "What do you think, Sarah? Do you think David uses me?" Another pause. Sarah was smarter than David, more emotionally intelligent. She could see the truth if she chose to. "I think you're going through a hard time," she said carefully. "Maybe you should talk to someone." A professional. So I was crazy. Not David for treating me like an ATM, not Sarah for expecting me to fund her son's spending money indefinitely. I was the one who needed professional help because I had finally objected to being used. "Actually," I said, "that's a wonderful idea. I think I will talk to someone. A therapist who can help me understand how I ended up in relationships where my only value is what I can provide. Mom, Sarah, let me ask you something. If I never gave you money again, if I never babysat Lucas, if I couldn't solve problems or provide services, would you still want a relationship with me?" "Of course," she said quickly. Too quickly. The kind of automatic response you give when you know what you're supposed to say. "Why?" I pressed. "What would you want from a relationship with me if I couldn't do anything for you?" The silence went on so long I thought she might have muted the phone. We would still be family. But what would we talk about? What would we do together? What would you enjoy about spending time with me?" She couldn't answer. And in her inability to answer, I heard the truth we both knew but had never acknowledged. She had no idea who I was beyond my usefulness to her. "I love you, Sarah," I said. "But I need you to figure out how to love me too. Not just accept my help, not just take my money, but actually love me as a person. And until you can do that, I think we need some space." "Mom, you're scaring me." "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save whatever's left of our relationship before resentment destroys it completely." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and waited to feel guilty. Waited to feel terrible about disappointing my children, about creating conflict, about potentially damaging relationships. But the guilt never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Pride. Pride in standing up for myself. Pride in refusing to accept unacceptable treatment. Pride in valuing myself enough to demand better. That evening, Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on my door with a plate of homemade pastels and an invitation to have dinner with her and her son's family the next Sunday. "Just because it's nice to share a meal with people you care about," she said. "No special occasion, no favors needed, just good food and good company." When was the last time someone had invited me anywhere without expecting something from me in return? I couldn't remember. "I would love that," I said, and meant it. Sunday dinner at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment was a revelation. Her son Miguel and his wife Carla treated me like an honored guest. They asked about my life, my interests, my opinions on everything from politics to movies to their daughter's school project. 8-year-old Isabella showed me her drawings and asked if I would teach her to make the cookies I had mentioned liking as a child. Miguel told stories about his mother's cooking that made everyone laugh, including Mrs. Rodriguez herself. Carla asked if I would be interested in joining their family for a trip to the Bronx Zoo, not because they needed help with anything, but because they thought I would enjoy it. I sat at their table, eating delicious food and listening to genuine laughter, and realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Warm, inclusive, interested in each person's well-being. No one asked me for money. No one gave me chores. No one treated me like I was lucky to be included. "You seem so much happier lately," Mrs. Rodriguez observed as we cleared the table together. "More relaxed." "I stopped trying to buy people's love," I said. "It's amazing how much energy that frees up." She nodded knowingly. "My first husband, Isabella's grandfather, he used to say that if you have to pay for someone's attention, you're not buying love, you're renting it." 2 weeks passed without contact from either David or Sarah. 2 weeks of peaceful mornings, productive days, genuine conversations with new friends. 2 weeks of remembering what it felt like to live for myself. I joined Martha's book club and discovered I had opinions about literature I had never allowed myself to explore. I started taking watercolor classes at the community center and found I had artistic intuition I never knew existed. I visited Frank at museums twice more and realized I enjoyed having male friendship without romantic pressure. My apartment began to feel less like a temporary stopping place and more like a chosen sanctuary. I bought plants for the windowsill and pictures for the walls. I rearranged furniture to create a reading corner where I could sit with my coffee and books in the morning light. I was becoming a person with interests, preferences, and joy that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs. Then David called. "Mom, you've made your point. This silent treatment has gone on long enough. Rachel is pregnant again, and we need to talk about the financial situation. Not, how are you? Not, I've missed you. Not, I've been thinking about what you said. Just straight to the financial situation." "Congratulations on the pregnancy," I said. "That's wonderful news." "Thanks. Look, with another baby coming, money is going to be even tighter. We need to know if you're going to be able to help, or if we need to make other arrangements." Other arrangements. As if my support was a utility service he could shop around for. "David, do you remember the conversation we had about wanting a relationship with me as a person, not just as someone who solves your problems?" Yeah, I remember. "Can we talk about that later? Right now I need to know about the money." "This is talking about it," I said. "Right now, in this conversation, you're doing exactly what I asked you to stop doing. You called me with news about your family, which I would love to celebrate with you and discuss, but immediately turned it into a financial request. Mom, I don't have time for games. Are you going to help us or not?" Games. My request to be treated with respect was a game to him. "I'm going to help you by saying no," I said. "I'm going to help you learn to manage your finances without depending on your elderly mother's social security and savings." "Are you kidding me? What am I supposed to do?" "What every other adult does. Make a budget. Live within your means. Make different choices if your current choices aren't sustainable. We can't afford this baby without help." The words hung in the air like an accusation, as if I were responsible for his family planning decisions, as if I were obligated to fund his reproductive choices. "David, if you can't afford another child, why are you having another child?" "Because we want a bigger family." "Then you need to figure out how to pay for it without bankrupting your mother." "You're not going to be bankrupt. You have plenty of money." "How do you know how much money I have?" "You sold your house for over $300,000. And I've been giving it to you for 3 years. Did you think that account was infinite?" For the first time in the conversation, he sounded uncertain. "How much is left?" "It doesn't matter how much is left. What matters is that I need that money for my own future. For medical expenses, for emergencies, for the possibility that I might need care as I get older. We'll take care of you when you get older." "How? You can't even take care of yourselves now. You can't afford the family you have without my help. How are you going to take care of me?" "We'll figure it out. Figure it out now. Figure out how to support your family without my money. Because that's what's going to happen whether you plan for it or not." I hung up feeling exhausted but resolute. Every conversation with David followed the same pattern. His needs, his problems, his assumption that my resources existed to solve them. An hour later, Sarah called. "Mom, David says you're refusing to help with the new baby." "David says a lot of things. What do you think about the situation?" "I think you're being unfair. Family helps family." "I agree. Family helps family. When was the last time anyone in this family helped me?" "We include you in things. You include me when you need something. When have you ever included me just because you wanted my company?" Sarah sighed heavily. "Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. We love you." "Show me." "What?" "Show me that you love me. Not by saying it, but by acting like it. Call me sometime when you don't need anything. Ask about my life. Share good news with me just because you want me to be happy for you. Spend time with me without giving me chores to do. That's not fair. You like helping." I like being needed. But I don't like being used. There's a difference. I'm not using you. Sarah, why did you call me today? Because I was worried about you. Were you worried about my emotional well-being, or were you worried that I might not give David money for his baby? Another long pause. Both, she said finally, and I had to give her credit for honesty. At least you're honest. But don't you see the problem? You're not really worried about me. You're worried about what my decisions might cost your brother. That's not true. Then let's test it. Let's have a relationship for the next 6 months where money never comes up. You don't ask for it, David doesn't ask for it, I don't offer it. Let's see if we can build something based on actually enjoying each other's company. Mom, that's ridiculous. We're adults. Adults help each other financially. Adults also have boundaries. Adults also have relationships that aren't transactional. Adults also care about each other's emotional well-being, not just their financial utility. Maybe you should talk to someone, Sarah said. This isn't like you. You're right, it's not like me. The old me would have apologized by now and sent David a check. The old me would have felt guilty for setting boundaries and backed down. But I'm not the old me anymore. What happened to you? I remembered that I'm a person with value beyond what I can provide to other people. I remembered that love shouldn't have to be purchased. Before she could respond, I ended the call. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went out to dinner alone. Not because I couldn't find anyone to go with me, but because I wanted to. I dressed nicely, chose a restaurant I'd always wanted to try, and sat at a table for one with a book and a glass of wine. The waitress was kind, asking about my book and making small talk about the weather. The couple at the next table smiled and nodded when I caught their eye. The food was delicious, and I ate slowly, savoring each bite without rushing to clean up or serve someone else. For the first time in decades, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, with no obligations to anyone else. It was magnificent. Walking home through the city streets, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. Not belonging to a family that used me, not belonging to relationships that drained me, but belonging to myself. Belonging to the city, to the community, to the simple pleasure of being alive and independent. Back in my apartment, I called Martha to tell her about the book club selection I had finished reading. We talked for 30 minutes about themes and characters and writing style. Not once did she ask me for anything. Not once did I offer to solve her problems. We simply shared thoughts and enjoyed each other's perspectives. This, I realized, was what friendship was supposed to feel like. 3 weeks later, I got a text from David. Mom, can we talk? I've been thinking about what you said. For the first time in months, he wasn't leading with a request. He wanted to talk. I called him back. Hi, Mom. Thanks for calling. You said you wanted to talk. Yeah, I've been thinking about our last conversation. About what you said about me only calling when I need something. He paused, and I waited, curious to see where this would go. I realize you might be right, he continued. I tried to remember the last time I called just to see how you were doing, and I couldn't. It was the first time in years that David had admitted he might be wrong about something involving our relationship. I'm listening, I said. I want to try to do better, to have more of a real relationship with you, but I need you to understand something too. Here it comes, I thought. The conditions, the excuses, the ways it was really my fault. After Dad died, you were always trying to help us. You were always offering to solve problems and give money and take care of things. I guess I started to see that as just how you showed love. Like that was your way of being involved in our lives. This was more self-reflection than I had heard from David in years. So when you suddenly stopped, he continued, it felt like you were withdrawing love, like you were punishing us for accepting what you had always offered. I hadn't considered this perspective, and it gave me pause. David, that's an interesting point. And you're probably right that I used helping as a way to feel needed and connected. But can you see how it might have felt to me when helping became expected rather than appreciated? Yeah, he said, and he sounded genuinely thoughtful. Yeah, I think I can see that. And can you understand how it felt to realize that you only contacted me when you needed something? That my value in your life seemed based entirely on what I could provide? I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that would hurt. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. It was the most honest conversation we had experienced in years. So how do we fix this? David asked. I don't know, I said. I think we both need to learn how to have a different kind of relationship. I need to learn how to connect with you without always trying to solve your problems. And you need to learn how to connect with me without always having problems that need solving. That sounds hard. It is hard, but I think it's worth trying. Me too. For the next few weeks, David and I talked regularly. Short conversations, nothing dramatic, just checking in. He told me about work, about Rachel's pregnancy, about the children's activities. I told him about my book club, about my watercolor classes, about new friends I was making. Neither of us mentioned money. It felt awkward at first, like we were learning to speak a new language. But gradually, it began to feel more natural. I began to see glimpses of the man my son had become, separate from his financial needs. He began to see glimpses of the woman I was becoming, separate from my desire to help. Sarah was slower to come around. She maintained that I was being unreasonable, that families should help each other without keeping score. But even she started calling more often, and our conversations gradually became less focused on what she needed and more focused on sharing our lives. The breakthrough came when Lucas called me directly. Grandma Maggie, can you help me with my school report about New York City? Mom said you lived there your whole life. No request for money, no crisis to solve, just a grandchild who wanted to learn something from his grandmother's experience. I spent an hour on the phone with Lucas, telling him stories about the city's history, about how different neighborhoods had changed over the decades, about my favorite places and memories. He asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. When Sarah came back on the phone afterward, she sounded different. Mom, I had no idea you knew so much about the city's history. Lucas was fascinated. I've lived here for 73 years, I said. I've accumulated some stories. Why haven't you shared them before? You never asked. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. I guess I never thought of you as having stories worth hearing, Sarah said quietly. I just thought of you as someone who could help with problems. It was the first time either of my children had acknowledged seeing me as more than a resource. I am someone who can help with problems, I said. But I'm also someone who has lived a full life, who has experiences and knowledge and perspectives that exist independent of your needs. I'm starting to understand that. The changes in our relationships were gradual but genuine. David started calling every Sunday, not because he needed anything, but because he wanted to maintain connection. We talked about current events, about memory, about changes in the neighborhood where he grew up. Sarah started sending photos of Lucas just because she thought I would enjoy them, not because she wanted me to send him something. She began asking my advice about parenting decisions, value my perspective as someone who had raised children successfully. Most importantly, they both stopped assuming I would solve their financial problems. David and Rachel adjusted their lifestyle to live within their means. Sarah took on extra work to pay for Lucas's expenses. They both learned to manage their lives without depending on my resources. The shift wasn't complete or perfect. Old patterns sometimes reasserted themselves, and we all had to consciously work to maintain the healthier boundaries we had established. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had relationships with my children rather than contractual arrangements. My life expanded in other ways too. Martha's book club became a monthly highlight, introducing me to literature and ideas that stimulated my mind in ways I had forgotten were possible. My watercolor classes led to genuine artistic expression and a vocabulary for emotions I had never been able to articulate. My friendship with Frank deepened into something comfortable and companionable. We visited museums together, attended concerts, shared meals, and conversations that covered everything from art to politics to the strange experience of rebuilding identity in your 70s. "You know what I've learned?" Frank said one afternoon as we sat in Central Park, watching people walk by. "The relationships that survive are the ones where both people benefit from the other person's happiness, not where one person benefits from the other person's sacrifice." His words perfectly captured what had been wrong with my family relationships and what was right with the new connections I was building. Mrs. Rodriguez and her family adopted me as honorary grandmother, including me in celebrations and weekly dinners, not because they needed anything from me, but because they genuinely enjoyed my company. 8-year-old Isabella called me Abuela Maggie and showed me her artwork and asked for stories about my childhood. For the first time in my adult life, I was surrounded by people who valued my presence rather than my presentations. The transformation wasn't just external. I felt different in my own body, more solid and confident. I walked with better posture, made eye contact with people on the street, spoke up in conversations instead of waiting for others to direct the discussion. My apartment became a reflection of my emerging sense of self. I bought art for the walls, plants for the windowsills, comfortable furniture arranged for my own pleasure rather than visitors' convenience. It became a sanctuary that felt like home rather than a temporary stopping place. Most importantly, I learned to enjoy my own company. Saturday mornings become precious time for reading and coffee without interruption. Evening walks through the neighborhood became opportunities for reflection and observation rather than anxious worry about who might need something from me. 6 months after the bathroom floor revelation, I realized I rarely thought about the money I wasn't giving my children anymore. The decision that had felt so dramatic and frightening had become simply part of how I lived, with boundaries, with self-respect, with attention to my own needs and desires. David and Rachel had their 3rd child, a daughter they named Grace. I sent a modest gift and a heartfelt card, but I didn't offer to pay for anything related to the baby's arrival. They didn't ask me to. When they invited me to meet Grace for the first time, it was a genuine invitation to share in their joy, not a request for babysitting services. I held my new granddaughter and felt pure happiness, not the complicated mixture of love and obligation that had characterized previous family interactions. Sarah was offered a promotion that required relocating to Portland. She called to share the news, to ask my advice about the decision, to process the complex feelings of leaving California. She didn't ask for moving money or financial help with the transition. She wanted emotional support and guidance, recognizing me as someone whose life experience might be valuable. "What do you think I should do, Mom?" she asked. "I think you should follow your instincts," I said. "You've always been smart about career decisions." "But what about Lucas? What about leaving his school and friends?" "Kids are resilient, and Portland is a wonderful city with great opportunities. Would you consider moving closer if I took the job? Not to live with us, but to be nearby?" The question surprised me. For years, Sarah had seemed indifferent to geographic distance. Now she was suggesting she might want me closer, not because she needed something, but because she valued our relationship. "I might consider that," I said. "Let me think about it." After we hung up, I realized I was actually excited by the possibility. Not because I was desperate for family connection, but because I was genuinely curious about exploring a new city in my 70s. Portland had art galleries and museums, hiking trails and cultural activities. It might be an adventure. The fact that I was approaching such a major life change from a position of strength rather than desperation felt revolutionary. That night, I called Frank to tell him about Sarah's news and my thoughts about potentially relocating. "What draws you to the idea?" he asked. Adventure, I said without hesitation. The chance to discover a new place, to reinvent myself somewhere else. And yes, being closer to Sarah and Lucas would be nice, but that's not the primary motivation. That sounds healthy, Frank said. Very different from your old pattern of arranging your life around other people's needs. He was right. 2 years ago, if Sarah had suggested I move to be closer to them, I would have started packing immediately without considering whether I actually wanted to live in Portland. Now, I was approaching the possibility as one option among many, weighing it against my own interests and desires. I decided to visit Portland for a long weekend to see how it felt. I booked the trip for myself, choosing a hotel downtown and planning activities that interested me. I let Sarah know I was coming, but I didn't ask her to entertain me or feel responsible for my visit. Portland was gorgeous, a smaller, more manageable city than New York, with incredible food, beautiful architecture, and access to both mountains and ocean. I could imagine myself living there, exploring the neighborhoods, finding new favorite restaurants and coffee shops. I spent one afternoon with Sarah and Lucas, having lunch and walking through a park. Lucas had grown taller and more articulate since I had seen him last. He told me about his school, his friends, his interest in learning guitar. "Would you really move here, Grandma Maggie?" he asked. "I might," I said. "What do you think about that?" "I think it would be cool. We could hang out more." The simplicity of his response touched me. Not complicated by adult needs or expectations, just a child's straightforward pleasure in having his grandmother nearby. Sarah seemed more relaxed than I had seen her in years. The promotion was going well. She was dating someone new who seemed kind and stable, and Lucas was thriving in his new school. "You seem really different, Mom," she observed over coffee. "More confident, more yourself." "I feel more myself," I said. "It turns out that when you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you have energy left over to figure out who you actually are. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you as a whole person instead of just my mom." The apology meant everything to me, not because I needed her guilt, but because it showed genuine recognition of how our relationship had been skewed. "We all did the best we could with what we knew at the time," I said. "What matters is that we're learning to do better." On the flight back to New York, I made a decision. I would move to Portland in the spring. Not to be closer to Sarah, though that would be nice. Not because New York had become unmanageable, though it was getting expensive and physically demanding, but because I was 73 years old and I wanted an adventure. I wanted to see what my life could look like if I designed it entirely around my own interests and desires. I wanted to wake up in a new place and figure out who Margaret Connor could become when she wasn't defined by other people's needs. The decision felt bold and terrifying and absolutely right. When I told David about my plans, he was characteristically practical. "Are you sure you want to start over in a new city at your age?" "I'm not starting over," I said. "I'm continuing forward. There's a difference." "What about your friends here? What about your routine?" "I'll make new friends. I'll develop new routines." "What if you don't like it?" "Then I'll move somewhere else." The confidence in my own voice surprised me. When had I become someone who trusted herself to navigate major life changes? Martha and the book club threw me a farewell party, complete with a reading list of authors from the Pacific Northwest. Frank promised to visit Portland in the summer, and we made tentative plans to attend some museum exhibitions together. Mrs. Rodriguez cried when I told her about the move, but she also expressed excitement about my adventure. "You are becoming the woman you were always meant to be," she said, holding my hands in hers. It just took a little while to find her. On my last night in my Manhattan apartment, I sat in my reading chair with a cup of tea and looked around at the space that had been my sanctuary for 3 years. The place I had initially seen as temporary and inadequate had become the launching pad for a completely new version of myself. I thought about the woman who had moved here after selling her house. Defeated, depleted. existing primarily to serve other people's needs. Then I thought about the woman who was packing for Portland, curious, confident, excited about what came next. They were barely recognizable as the same person. The bathroom floor where I had cried over David's text message seemed like a location from someone else's life. I couldn't imagine that level of desperation anymore. That complete dependence on other people's approval for a sense of self-worth. I had learned the difference between being needed and being valued. I had learned the difference between helping and enabling. I had learned the difference between love and transaction. Most importantly, I had learned that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be. My phone rang. It was David. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to call and see how you're feeling about tomorrow." No requests, no problems to solve. Just a son checking on his mother's emotional state. "I'm feeling excited," I said. A little nervous, but mostly excited. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know this isn't easy, but you seem really happy lately." "I am happy, happier than I've been in years." "Good. You deserve that." After we hung up, I realized it was the first time in decades that David had said I deserved something good. Not that I should be grateful for what I had. Not that I should stop complaining about what I lacked, but that I deserved happiness. It was the gift I had been waiting 73 years to receive. Recognition from my child that I was a person worthy of good things. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Portland with 2 suitcases and a heart full of possibility. I had a small apartment waiting for me, a city to explore, and no obligations except to myself. As the plane lifted off from LaGuardia, I looked out the window at Manhattan sprawling below and felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the city that had sheltered me, for the family that had forced me to grow, for the crisis that had revealed my strength. But mostly, gratitude for finally learning that the most important relationship in my life was the one I had with myself. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new favorite coffee shop in Portland, writing in the journal I've kept since moving here. The entries are very different from those desperate recordings of family interactions I used to make. These pages are filled with discoveries, new restaurants, hiking trails, art exhibitions, books, people. The mountains are visible from my apartment window, and I've already planned 3 weekend trips to explore different areas. I've joined a hiking group for seniors, a photography class, and a volunteer program at the art museum. Sarah and Lucas visit regularly, but not out of obligation. We genuinely enjoy each other's company. Lucas is learning guitar, and he plays songs for me when he comes over. Sarah asks my advice about work decisions and dating choices, valuing my perspective as someone who has navigated many life transitions. David and his family visited last month, their first trip to Portland. They stayed in a hotel because we all understood that hosting them wasn't my responsibility. We had dinner together several times, just enjoyed each other's company without anyone expecting anything from anybody else. Frank came for a visit as promised, and we explored Portland's art scene together. He's considering relocating here himself, drawn not by any obligation, but by genuine attraction to the city's culture and natural beauty. I have new friends here, other adventurous older adults who moved to Portland for similar reasons. We share stories about reinventing ourselves later in life, about the courage required to value your own desires over other people's expectations. My watercolor painting has evolved into something I might actually call art. I have pieces hanging in my apartment and have even sold a few through a local gallery that features work by older artists. But the most profound change is internal. I wake up every morning with curiosity about what the day might bring rather than dread about who might need something from me. I make decisions based on my own interests and energy rather than other people's demands. I have conversations about ideas and experiences rather than problems and solutions. I am no longer anyone's ATM, anyone's unpaid employee, anyone's emotional dumping ground. I am Margaret Connor, a woman who loves art and books and hiking, who has interesting experiences and opinions worth sharing, who is good company for herself and others. It took me 73 years to meet her, but I'm very glad we finally found each other. Have you ever found yourself wondering if you're being used by people who claim to love you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, valued only for what you can provide rather than who you are? I want you to know that it's never too late to change the dynamic. It's never too late to set boundaries, to demand respect, to choose your own happiness over other people's comfort. But mostly, I want you to know that you are worth loving for exactly who you are, not for what you can do for anyone else. If this story feels familiar, if you recognize yourself or someone you love in these words, please share it in the comments below. And if these words have helped you in any way, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when someone has the courage to speak the truth that others are afraid to say. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me. And remember, you are never too old to choose yourself.